I'm talking to Jennifer Poole from Those Coffee People, based out in Colombia. Actually, whereabouts in Colombia are you situated?
In Medellin.
Okay. And we're going to talk specifically when we touch base. I really wanted to talk to you about direct trade and obviously talk about what your business does. But direct trade is such a hot topic at the moment, and it's something that personally I'm really trying to get my head around. So I make sure that I'm presenting a fair story, because I'm maybe being accused, and I'm only accusing myself of maybe being a little bit seemingly biased towards direct trade versus some other initiatives and models that are out there. And I want to make sure I'm being fair in that assessment. And I guess everything's got its place. But I'd love to hear from you as a sort of somebody on the ground who gets really involved in it to understand a little bit more what it's like and how the benefits actually directly affect the farmers, which is something ultimately that we're all trying to achieve. Because in both an altruistic way, we want the coffee farmers to have dignified lives. But in another way also, we still want to be able to get our coffee in the future, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really interesting question. And like you said, it is very popular right now. I think now more than ever, people are aware of what this idea of direct trade is. And if it's okay with you, I wanted to kind of start like from the beginning, starting with traditional trade and like how did we arrive to direct trade being
beautiful? That's perfect.
Popular, being like a household concept. So traditionally, like the coffee buying process has a lot of hands that touch the coffee before it gets to the end consumer. In the trade, I've written this out, and you can say on average there are 10 entities that will be touching the coffee. So you have the farmer. You'll move to a co-op, maybe a mill, some packaging companies. You'll have a company specifically for exporting, a company specifically for importing. Maybe both the importer and the exporter have a trader that they work with on commission. You can have an in-country distributor. You can have a roaster who then sells it to a restaurant or a cafe and then sells it to a customer. So there's a very big complicated model that gets coffee from the farm to the end consumer. And it's not complicated because people want to make it complicated. It's complicated because international trade is very difficult. It is not easy to move goods from one country to an end consumer. And all of these people have been put into this system because they specialize in the exact action of the supply chain that they do. Normally, farmers don't have mills, so that's why you have to add in a mill. How do you get it from the farmer to a mill? A co-op. How do you get it out of the country? An exporter. And please stop me in case the Wi-Fi cuts off and I don't feel bad.
You keep going for the next 30 minutes. Okay. I'll let you know.
Perfect. So this big complex system was not created because so many people wanted to get a piece of the pie. It's just because it's a very big and complex process. So that's the way it was since the beginning. There have been a lot of people involved in this. And then as, I guess you could say, awareness started to spread with how little of the pie the farmers are getting, there was a spark of having fair trade. So fair trade is the concept that the people in the beginning, the people who are maybe most vulnerable in this entire supply chain, the people who are responsible for this all happening but have the littlest voice, this idea of fair trade was created so that it could aid those most vulnerable. Fair trade, it's a great idea. It's a great concept. It is supposed to give better prices to the producers, to the actual farmers. It's supposed to have some add values to the customers to ensure that there can't be certain like GMO elements, there can't be certain pesticides, certain herbicides, there can't be child labor, for example, which is of course something that you want to take care about. And this started to grow. This started to grow in popularity and success. However, certifications are not a perfect system. With certifications, it's easily possible to kind of cheat the system. And there have been a lot of scandals that have come out, unfortunately, of people in the middle taking advantage of these certifications. People maybe not passing those profits down to the producer, people lying, people just flat out not operating in a fair trade way. And we have to keep in mind that the fair trade certifiers are a business. They make money out of all of this. So if we want to look at it in kind of a cynical way, like they are now an additional hand grabbing from the same pie.
Yep.
a lot of them are out there doing good, but it's not a perfect system. So now enters the idea of like, why is direct trade becoming a household concept? So direct trade is essentially where you cut out as many middlemen as is possible. It's not possible to fully cut out mills. It's not possible to cut out exporters if the farmers are not an exporter. It's not possible to cut out the importer if you are not directly the one importing. There are some necessary middlemen, but direct trade is the concept of, as close to the end consumer as possible, buying directly from the farmer. Direct trade is a way for the buyer to, with the most confidence, know exactly what the farmer or the producer is getting, because in a direct trade model, even the people in the middle, the necessary middlemen, will have an open dialogue between the customers and the producers. So I wanted to give a little bit of background of like, how did the system work? How do other models such as fair trade try to help this? And then how did direct trade kind of come to popularity, understanding the flaws of a fair trade model?
And the producers, one of the questions I had was, how do you, or my understanding is that when you're in a direct trade model, one of the challenges that, let's say you're a roaster who wants to buy from a producer in Colombia, one of the challenges you've got is that those farmers may not themselves, as a small farmer, necessarily have the skills to be able to do the right selection, grading, and so forth. So I know that some roasters have got directly involved, not just buying directly, but also investing in training and other areas so that they can really, I guess, make a more sustainable supply chain. What other challenges are there in the direct trade model?
That's definitely one. A knowledge sharing process is a major benefit out of very good direct trade partnerships. However, additional challenges are the fact that if you're dealing with a farmer, maybe they're great at growing their crops, but a lot of them are not business people. And international trade is very much a business. And so maybe some people don't understand the complexities of like receiving a foreign currency. Coffee trade is a very high revenue, low profit margin business. So there's huge amounts of money that's moving across borders. You have to deal with currency loss. In Colombia, you have to deal with massive legalization processes of getting money into the country. You have to deal with taxes. You have to deal with laws. And a lot of farmers who are great at what they do and great at growing coffee, they might not understand these concepts. Perhaps they don't speak English. Perhaps they don't have a formal company. Perhaps they don't have an accounting partner, a legal partner who could help them with starting a company, or they just don't have the capital to be able to invest in something like this. So one difficult element of direct trade is finding a partner that has the capability of doing all this while still staying true to the farmers themselves, while not removing the business services from the farmers.
Right. Do you know, that's actually a lot more problems than I thought you were going to say. I had a few in mind, and I thought I maybe had a good handle on it, but you're right, that's a lot. And you pick up a couple of good points there. The low margin is also, I think, a contributing factor to the volatility. And one thing I want to touch on in a second is about the farmers' incentive to continue working in the coffee industry, and also whether they are growing specialty coffee or just growing the simpler plants for which they can sell at the C price, to the national associations. But the first point on volatility was something when I was looking at this from maybe more of a financial point of view and trying to understand why coffee farmers weren't getting paid. Like if I paid more in the shop, why did that not translate to the coffee farmer getting paid? Because logically that's a step that you can make. But actually all the different steps in between really, what's the word? Disassociate one from the other.
Yeah.
There is not a direct turn the wheel here and the vehicle moves. Actually, what you've got in the middle, and the things that I was looking at, I looked at currency as the currency fluctuations. I looked at the futures market. And obviously, if you're growing Arabica beans or specialty Arabica beans, but you're selling to a growers association, the seed price is based on, is based on non-specialty beans, and it's this commodity price. Then what's the point, right? That's the price. So then you have logistics costs, which vary. You have pandemics. You have climate change. You have all of these other factors that go in. And so actually, to me, looking at this as somebody that's frankly relatively new in trying to get his head around the coffee farming, and my background in coffee is more the drinking and restaurant and cafe side. So I can make a wonderful espresso. Actually, some people may argue that point, but I think I make a wonderful espresso. But the coffee farming side of it, I have to get my head around. And so I looked at this with my background in finance. I looked at it from that point of view, and I said, well, actually, this is really complex. And those people just saying, you should pay more, you should pay more, you should pay more. It feels right, but it's not right. And there's just too many complexities. So direct trade seemed to make a lot of sense to me, because you're simply taking a lot of the variables out of the equation, which means you're going to have more control. But then, as you said, things like having local knowledge, the shipping, the dealing with potentially corrupt, I don't know if I should say this, and I'm sure it's not the case in Colombia, people you're dealing with, but I've dealt with a lot of corrupt individuals. As a matter of fact, I remember celebrating in a country when they put in, the government put in a board, an anti-corruption board. And I thought, finally, we're going to start seeing like the corruption. But no, what actually happened was the corruption increased, because now you had one more layer to bribe.
No.
Now you had to bribe the anti-corruption board as well.
Oh, geez.
So you've got all of these complexities, and shipping in itself is incredibly difficult. Yes. And I've done shipping. It was actually my very first business. My last name is Basket. My very first business was I bought 40,000 baskets. The very first business I did was I shipped 40,000 baskets from Indonesia to England to a shop called a Body Shop here. And I remember they were going to the Isle of Wight, which is a sort of an island just off the coast, where they were packaged up with sort of smelly fruits and things. And I remember the confusion that everybody had, because we were flying over there to go and monitor operations, and they heard that the baskets were arriving on this date, but that wasn't the shipping date that they had. And this caused all sorts of problems, because they were confusing my name with the actual shipment, and they thought the baskets were arriving on a different date. And, I mean, then they arrived, and some were moldy because they hadn't been, the materials used were too young, and some were bent out of shape because they weren't packaged properly, and who was responsible. Yeah, so shipping is not a simple topic. It's a nightmare, right?
Nightmare. I have nightmares about logistics. I'm serious. That is what gives me the most stress in this job, is logistics.
Right. Let's lead on to that, and let's talk about, because I can honestly, hand on heart, say that I would never go and do business in a country without having a trusted third party there. The tricky thing is finding the trusted third party. Okay, that is always the tricky thing. Tell us about what you do and how you help businesses in the model. So if I was a roaster, I wanted to buy beans, direct trade beans, high quality. I wanted to do the right thing, but also be able to promote that I'm doing the right thing, have more control, all the benefits that we see out of this model. And I came to you, what would you tell me? What could you do for me?
So if you want to make sure that you are on board with the direct trade model the entire time, I would say the first thing in a normal time is come to Colombia. If you want to document, like, for example, to your customers that you are doing this entire journey, come meet us in person. Obviously, that's more difficult for some people. It's more difficult if you're far away. It's more difficult if the borders are closed.
If you're going to do it, right, do it. Make a commitment. Don't do something like this half-hearted.
Yeah. And that's the coolest thing, is when we can receive some clients and then we can say, okay, we are technically in the middle. We don't own and operate the farms. We are partners with the farms. They are within our network, but technically we're an additional party. So let's go straight to the source. maybe you can't speak to the farmer. We'll translate for you. Let's put you on their land. You can see their crops. You can meet them. You can meet their families. You can see their children. Then you establish this connection. Direct trade is all about connections. If you want to really get the most of it, make the connection with the people. Once you have that down, then what we can do is we can create an entirely bespoke experience for you as a customer. If you want specific lots, if you need specific amounts, if you want us to process it in different types of ways. For example, with some of our producers, Finca Las Brisas, for example, they produce coffee, and you can either order it to be done washed, honey process, or natural. So by making this connection, directly the roaster with the farm, with the producer, you can even say exactly how you want us to process the coffee for you. So then the entire experience, from the moment you make the connection, from the moment you make the inquiry until the moment you receive your goods, is entirely bespoke and exactly how it would best benefit your customers. Some additional things that we can do is we provide a lot of like marketing materials. So we're on the farms all the time. You know, we can go there. We could either bring like a professional photographer. We have a photographer in our network that we use all the time for this kind of stuff. We can take pictures on our cell phones. By the way. Thank you very much. Yeah. I have to say to our photographer Pipe Velasquez, he's done a lot of great work for us. But we can do anything that can benefit our client to be able to share our story with his clients. We like to think of our business as not just B2B. I mean, we are a B2B business, but we want to somehow be B2B to C. His clients, the roaster's clients, they would be our clients. And so we want to do everything possible to make them have the best experience with that. You
want to see your clients succeed. And because you know if they're successful, then that's going to come back to you and it's going to help you, right? This is the right psychological approach in business. The more you help other people, the more, exactly. The more you help other people, the more things come back to you. And I think that's the right approach, definitely. So if I'm a roaster, what kind of profile is there? I don't say a typical, but I mean, if I'm a small roaster, is this out of my reach? At what stage does this become a viable model to pursue? It really depends on how much you're able to pay for shipping. We can send you the smallest amount. However, like we were saying, logistics is a nightmare. And if we're talking about small amounts, you're going to end up paying a lot for shipping. Oftentimes, we have clients who pay almost the same amount for shipping as they do for the coffee, which I could imagine as a business owner would break my heart in two. However, that's just the situation. If you do want to make a direct impact and buy directly from farmers, it is possible, even at 1 kilo. It just depends on if you're willing to also invest in the logistics costs that go with that. Normally, we deal with clients who are looking to buy around 5,000 kilos. With 5,000 kilos, we could send it by sea. It's not the best prices, but it's decent prices. We also have a lot of clients who buy around 1,000 kilos and will send that by air. Again, it's not cheap at all, but it's getting to a point where it's manageable. Yes. Okay. And so it's preferential to send that by air than do a part container shipment? Consolidating coffee is very difficult and poses many risks to the integrity of the coffee, especially if we're talking about a shipment that's going to have connections. For example, we have a lot of clients that are in the GCC. So let's say Saudi Arabia, Kuwait. If we're sending coffee by boat, it's going to have 2 connections. And if we're talking about a consolidated container, that means 2 additional ports that are going to open the container and move the coffee and risk damaging it. If you are just ordering a small amount of coffee, and it's maybe an expensive coffee, it's a special coffee, oftentimes it's better to just get it sent directly by air. By air, it takes 4 days to the GCC. By sea, it could take 55 to 60, and with consolidation, it could take up to 90. So there's just more chance of risk. And so you're paying for the assurance that there's less likely going to be damage to the goods. And even though we provide insurance with our shipments, I mean, it's not an instant fix. You still waste time. The coffee gets wrecked. I mean, that's not good for anyone. Even small producers, sometimes they're sending 5,000 kilos. That's their whole harvest. If that gets wrecked, even if we can cover the cost through the insurance,
it doesn't save the fact that that was that person's entire half a year of work.
Let's go back and actually to talk about that for a second, because I know it's a key interest to a lot of people, is understanding, actually, I guess, not so much the farmer's motivations, but a little bit more getting inside the head of the farmer, right? So these farmers, are they going back generations? Are they farmers whose fathers and with farmers whose grandfathers were farmers? Are they coming from a heritage of farming coffee? Because I know that in Colombia, coffee was a big thing. I think if I'm going to get this, tell me if I get this wrong, in the second half of the 19th century, it started to become a big thing. Was that right?
It actually was first established as a national organization in the end of the 20s, beginning of the 30s. Okay. Juan Valdez, however, kind of went around the world and spread the image of Colombian coffee in the 50s. Yeah. But Colombia as a country established organizations to export coffee as like a united whole in the late 20s. I believe it was 1927.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll have to update the Wikipedia entry because I looked it up. I thought I was going to sound smart. Damn it, Wikipedia. Okay.
Juan Valdez took the world by storm in about the 50s.
He did.
He iconic character. Yeah. He
did. And so there's been several generations of farmers that are coming through.
Yes.
And the challenges, have they always been there? Are the challenges more pronounced? Are there more difficulties now than there were in the past? How have they managed to survive, and why do they continue farming? Are there little other choices that they have?
I think that these could fit into a couple of different buckets. There are the very, let's say, rustic farmers whose grandparents got the land, they put coffee crops on the land, and they're just growing it. Maybe there's little innovation, there's little education, they produce their coffee, they sell it to the local market, and that's kind of it. The land is already paid for, it's productive, and they just keep maintaining it. So that's one bucket of farmers that have been around for generations. They didn't have to buy the land, they don't have a mortgage on it, it's just running. It's just freely operating. There's another bucket of farmers who have been maybe like third, fourth generation farmers, but they're investing in innovation. Maybe they're putting extra infrastructure on their land. They're getting more resistant crops. They're able to add like special varieties. They're able to improve themselves, get better prices, and kind of continue selling both to the local and international market. For them, people who've invested in their farms, they do have a chance of risk. If you have made an investment and the coffee price tanks, you're a little bit out of luck. If you have been investing, you've been spending money and the returns aren't there, you risk having a loss. Rather than someone who's just running land that's paid for and they're just kind of doing that. Then you could say there's another,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's another bucket of farmers that are maybe newly involved in the business. They saw an opportunity, they bought the farm, maybe it's been around for 5, 10, 15 years. But there are a lot of farmers like that, and a lot of these guys are doing really cool processes. We actually work with a farm that's relatively new. They're about 10 years old, but they're doing so much in terms of innovation, studying, like making research, making experiments, seeing what's happening, how to make things better. And they're that newer generation of farmers, producers, who have taken this with a different angle. Rather than like, well, my grandpa did it, so I'll do it. They chose to go into that industry and are putting a lot of innovation into it.
So on innovation, one of the things actually I was thinking about when we're talking about relatively low margins, so one way to increase the margins is some things are outside of your control, right? You cannot control the dollar, the peso to the dollar rate. But what you can do is you can potentially innovate to create a higher yield. So that for every dollar you're putting in, you're getting more out. So even if the price doesn't change, your more efficient operation means that your margins have increased. And anybody who runs a business knows it's all about the margins, right? Yeah. So it's all about the margins. Let's talk a little bit about margins. And because I think this is one way that we can, it's not a sexy way and it's not an easy way and it doesn't get any headlines, right? But if you can find a way to squeeze better margins out of your production, whether that's through efficiencies or innovation, then you're going to be better positioned to weather the fluctuations that happen in other parts of the supply chain that are outside of your control. So it's fascinating what you were just saying. Tell me, do you have any numbers? Like what kind of margins are people operating to? And do you have an idea of what's maybe a safe margin? Where do we need to get to where it gets to a point where we can say, actually, we're operating at this level of gross margin, and even if the C price changes here, or even if the peso strengthens, as I believe it has quite significantly in the last 6 months, year, then we'll still be able to turn a profit. Ergo, we'll still stay in business and we'll still be producing the coffee that everyone wants to drink.
I would say that, and I'm just really making this number up, but maybe like 1 in 4, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 producers who you would speak to would even think about having that conversation. I think a lot of people, yes, a lot of people don't see their farms as a business. If you have a producer who sees their farm as a business and sees that they could run it as a business, that's the minority. I don't know specifically, but I could imagine, yeah, there's an overwhelming majority of farms that are run with no understanding of a profitability model, no understanding of profit margin, no understanding of the difference of revenue versus profit. Yeah. We are really talking about some of the most vulnerable people in society who are running this entire industry. People who don't have formal education, people who don't have coaches, people who don't have support of the business community, who have been essentially taken advantage of by large companies. They buy everything at the cheapest price possible, and they don't invest back into educating the farmers about how to run their farm like a business. This first bucket that I was explaining, the people who've done it, the grandparents bought the land, they've just been growing coffee. That's what they know. The coffee grows in one time of the year, in the rainy season, then it becomes the sunny season and the new beans are forming, then it becomes the rainy season again and we pick the coffee and then repeat and repeat and repeat. I would say that I do know there are times where the profitability is negative, where it costs more money to run the farm than what the government will pay for the coffee. I know with my partner, my business partner, his family experienced this time in coffee and sold the farm. So it's not worth it. A lot of people, they cut down the trees and they put cows on the land. Okay, if we could talk about some of the latter buckets of people who more understand it's a business. They could see profit margins anywhere from 5, 10, 12, 15%. Depending on how effective they are in planting the trees. Do you know the exact distance from one tree to another? If the tree gets bigger and it needs to take more land, will it yield more than many trees packed together? How do different varieties interact with different soil? There's so many factors that then these farmers who are taking their farm as a business will play with. What's the perfect profit margin? There's no right answer. There are different profit margins that work for different people. There are some people who don't get any profit margin, and there are some people who still need to learn about what a profit margin is.
So if you've got a new company, it's going to come to you and say, hey, listen, I'm a medium buyer. I'm going to be taking however many tons a month. It's going to be, I don't know, somewhere in the median range of your typical customer. I'll come to Colombia. We'll walk around some farms. We'll do the photo shoot, but we'll also get an idea of what it is that we can do some tasting. We'll get an idea of what it is that we're going to buy. Really start to get some direct connections, have a feeling of a direct connection with the farmers. So we can go back, we can tell our story. We've got something, we've got a unique selling point. We've got a story we can tell. We're doing some good, etc. Now, in that instance, in that model, what kind of farmer, given the buckets that you've just said, what kind of farmer are you plugging them into?
Probably it would be the first bucket or the second bucket. The third bucket of farmers that are, let's say, newly buying farms, newly investing, they're more likely to be running their own client base. Right. The ones that we can help the most are the first and the second buckets. With them, they would, of course, have to have enough land that they can produce enough. And for a lot of people, they only have like 1 hectare, for example. What will happen with them is they'll get together with their neighbors. And so the production of the whole like little neighborhood or the whole community will go together. So we do deal a lot with small communities, 10, 12 neighbors who get together. They all sell their coffee as one origin, which if you look compared to like a large estate or even a medium estate, these farmers are considered to be one origin. Even though the land is divided amongst like different properties, it's one origin. So yeah, it would be more of the smaller farmers who are looking to not sell to the government, but to start to sell more to the private market, the international market.
And in terms of how much more they could get paid, I've seen some quite substantial differences between, say, what they would get paid, obviously what they would get paid by the government, but also even what they would get paid by fair trade if they qualified, for which I understand many of them wouldn't because they'd be too small and they just don't hit the radar of someone like fair trade. So they don't have fair trade as an option, let's say. Their option is government or direct trade or anything else. Have I missed anything, or is it literally government or direct trade?
Well, you can also go to like trading companies. I'm going to give you a big example. Like, let's imagine, and I'm making this up. I don't know if this is true or not, but let's imagine a big company like Costco. It's like, okay, we need coffee supply for our own brand. We want to make, let's go to a village. Let's go to an entire state and say, we want all of the production here. You're going to sell it to us. It's kind of a direct trade, but it's not so much in a way that can benefit the end farmer. Usually large companies like that who come in and say, I'm going to buy everything, they'll say, give it to me for 80 cents on the dollar. Yeah. So it could be direct. It is going directly to the people who will sell it, but it's this large company model where they'll squeeze you for every penny that's possible. That is possible. And there are a lot of companies that do that in a poor way, in a medium way, and in a good way. I'm sure that there are many big companies who do provide fair and even better than market rate prices. So yes, I would say there would be a couple, those different ways. The government, maybe really large companies, and then the more direct to smaller roasters.
As a matter of interest, do the large companies guarantee a price, or do they say we'll pay the price at the time? Do they calculate
I'm sure that
the
they
price
do it both ways. They could do it both ways. If you are going to say, I want a futures contract where you say, I promise that I will pay you X amount for the next 12 months.
Right. Yeah, because I think that's also, one of the cases, if you know, and this is the whole point of futures, right, is that you actually have some certainty going into your production. So as long as you know that you're going to get a price that's going to cover your costs and give you a percentage profit, you may or may not care that you've extracted the most profit because you've also hedged against making a loss. So in that respect, I can see the big companies could be offering a service as long as they're not exploiting or be seen to be exploiting. And that's something very interesting and worth looking into. I know the supermarkets here in the UK were accused by a lot of the farmers of doing the same thing, especially in the milk. They would monopolize. So basically, they became the only game in town. And if you really wanted to produce at volume, you had to sell to them, and they were very robust, let's say, in their negotiating tactics. So I do understand that model. So the best potential option that somebody has got is a direct trade model. I mean, let's be fair in this. Are there any drawbacks to the direct trade model?
Definitely. I mean, when people do business, I would say the risk is mostly to the buyer.
Right.
The customer. The customer is making a risk in dealing with a small company, in dealing directly with a farmer, and things happen. If there's too much sun, let's imagine you say, I'll buy your entire harvest, and then there's too much sun, and then the harvest only yields half of what it was projected to do. With a large company, they have more ways to fix that sort of situation. They could source from a couple of different farms. They could source from a different region. They could get the supply. But if you're dealing directly with one farm and you've contracted only with that one farm, you can find yourself with more risky situations, right? Yeah, without certain assurances. For the farmer, I guess you could also expect, like, maybe they produce the coffee under the trust that the person will pay, and the person backs out, and what are you going to do? What are you going to chase them across borders in a legal case? Yeah, good luck.
Right.
It's a lot of trust. Even if you have a contract, the contract is almost worth nothing. It's 98% trust.
Yeah. Yeah, nobody wants to take anyone to court. I don't know what the court system is like in Colombia, but many of these court systems in countries I've been in, you know, A, you can't rely on them being fair in the first place. B, it'll cost too much money, and C, it'll take years. Yeah. So, you know, let's move on with our lives. How could you potentially help, Jennifer? And I've got to ask one last question, actually, before we go, because we've got 10 more minutes, actually 5 more minutes, really. I got to jump on another call, but I really want to talk to you. I don't want to talk to the next person. I got to be honest with you.
Oh no, poor them.
They're lawyers. I don't want to talk to lawyers, but anyway.
Oh no, okay.
So this is much more fun, but I've got to ask, those coffee people, what a great name. There has to be a story.
Oh, it came as like a name in the midst of like a really stressful time when I was thinking of a name for the company. I had in mind the idea of direct trade. That was going to be our identity. That's the core of who we are. And so we were thinking, like, who is involved in direct trade? Is it just us? Is it just the farmer? Is it just the roaster? Like, no, there are so many more people than just us. In direct trade, you got to include, let's say, the truck driver who's driving from the farm to the mill. You got to include even like the small workers at the mill, the people who do the packaging, the people who are stamping all the sacks. You technically have, you know, the guy in the customs, the customs representative. You have the importation representative. You have the truck driver driving it to the final customer. You have the final customer and you have their customer. Like, we're all in this. We are all in this together. We are all those coffee people. And so that was the idea. It's not just me. It's not just you. It's not just the farmer.
That's like, a great name.
We are all together in this. We are all those coffee people. So that was the main idea. And then I thought, I want a name that's catchy. And so if I was trying to go for word of mouth, which I hope one day our business is growing based only on word of mouth, we don't need to advertise, nothing. I wanted to have it in mind. Someone's like, hey, where do you get your coffee? And then go, oh, you know, those coffee people.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's so good. It's so good.
That's the goal. One day, that'll be the only marketing we need.
Oh, bravo. Well, look, I tell you what, let's wrap it up there. I sort of feel like there has to be a part 2 at some stage. I'd love to have you back and talk some more. It's been such an enjoyable time. And for once, I did an interview without my cat jumping on my lap and demanding attention. So nice. My door doesn't, I'm working out of a home office now because of the whole lockdown thing. My door doesn't shut properly. It doesn't click a lot. So my cat can get in, and I'm going to have to either remember to put something against the door or something. But normally he comes in, jumps on the table, goes all over the keyboard. Everything goes haywire. Everyone misses the call or something like that. But so it's been a great call, but most enjoyable to talk to you, Jennifer. Absolutely fascinating. And I've learned a lot. I really feel like there's more we've got to talk about. But I appreciate you coming on and spending time with us.
Yeah, absolutely, Nick. It was a pleasure, and I'd love to come back and continue this conversation.